Oxford psychologist Dr. Olivera Petrovich is the author of an upcoming book, The Child's Theory of the World. Working in the developmental psychology department at Oxford, her main focus of research and teaching is in the area of the psychology of religion. Her research, focusing on the development of spirituality in children, has gained worldwide attention. In fact, she recently made the headlines by reporting that the natural inclination of children is towards a belief in some kind of creator. Dr. Petrovich situates her research within mainstream developmental psychology. She explains that whereas in the past it was thought that children were a blank slate at birth, the consensus now is that this isn't quite the case, that in fact children bring with them certain assumptions and theories with which to make sense of the world in causal terms, that certain events, like the origin of the universe, have certain types of causes. It's been within that framework that Olivera has begun to look at the early acquisition of religious understanding in children. What is there in religion, if anything, that occurs independent of culture, she asks. When I met with her in Oxford, I asked her about one of the studies revealing early belief in some kind of creator that was conducted in Japan. Now, Japan is a culture where belief in a creator is not really encouraged, so this is fascinating stuff.
I was very surprised how things can be perpetuated in the literature, which is studied everywhere in the world, that has never been checked out on the ground. Is this really how ordinary Japanese people think?
And the key finding was?
The key finding was that, for example, they had very similar ideas to how natural beings, natural things come into being as Western children, as British in this instance, because I started with them. So the most surprising, in fact, was that they very often, regularly suggested that God was the creator of natural objects. It's almost an abomination, so to speak, to pretend to know that God does this and that and how God does it. Their conception of God as a transcendent being is so remote that you really shouldn't pretend to discuss it at all. They are critical quite a lot of Western, particularly of the Christian religion, in its theology. In Japanese, I understand there isn't even a word theology because they just wouldn't embark on such an enterprise to devise a theory about how God is. So that's the background against which, you see, these people had to... they developed their own private, of course, theory of the world, which is very similar to the theory of the world that Western children and adults have. Incidentally, I found the same thing with Japanese adults, which is even more striking because adults are far more influenced by culture wherever they are. Life, a living organism, that is the work of God. So it is a kind of, obviously they are influenced, but not everybody. There are people, many Japanese adults, who simply had identical view to the Western adults.